Brilliant. Okay. Um, well, hello, my name's Bea. I'm from the Environment Centre. We help people across Hampshire stay warm and well at home. We run various projects, one just in Southampton, one in Portsmouth, and then also Hitting the Cold Spots, which is across the whole of Hampshire. Today, we're going to look at managing energy bills and payments, resolving issues with energy suppliers, staying warm or cool today. Staying cool is much more relevant at home, reducing damp and mold, as well as accessing some extra support. So to start with, managing bills and payments. There are lots of energy suppliers available in the UK. Much fewer than there were a few years ago. So there were around 80 for the energy crisis. We're now down to around 20, which means many people have been moved from one supplier to another without requesting the change. So one example is SSE. A lot of SSE customers are now with OVO. Don't worry if that's happened. You haven't done anything wrong. It's just OVO took over SSE's customers when SSE stopped operating as a gas and electricity supplier. Across energy suppliers, the prices are very comparable. Currently, most customers get the cheapest deal on a standard variable tariff. These are really similar across suppliers because they are charging at just under the energy price cap. So you might have heard about the energy price cap in the news. We've got the levels here. So the last level, April to June, was on average £1,690. The current level, we've had a slight decrease down to 1,568. The next level from October to December is predicted to increase to 1,723. That's an average for the year. Obviously, that's just a prediction. We don't know what the actual level will be up until closer to the time. And it's important to remember as well that that is just for a typical household. So your actual bill depends on other things such as the size of your home, how much energy you're using, what type of appliances you've got, how you're paying for your energy, what type of tariff you're on, and so on. But basically, the energy price cap is just doing this. It's wiggling. So we're going a little bit up, a little bit down, a little bit up, a little bit down. But we're staying pretty steady throughout the whole year. What makes up a bill is two things: the standing charge and the unit rate. So the standing charge is what you pay every day just to be connected to the grid. The unit rate is how much you're paying per unit of energy. Both of those have a price cap on them. So you might just be able to see them in the top right there. Currently, electricity is at 22 pence per kilowatt hour. That's the unit rate. Gas is at 5 pence per unit hour. The standing charge for electricity is 60 pence per day, and for gas is 31 pence per day. It's actually the standing charge that's been increasing the most recently. And together those make up your total bill. So what that means is if you are connected to gas, even if you turn off your heating and you don't use any hot water all summer, you'll still have to pay because you've got that daily standing charge just to be connected to the grid. There are different ways to pay. So there are more than just these five, but these are the five most common. So on receipt of bill means that you pay for your energy after you've used it when you receive a bill. The bill will tell you how much to pay, and the quickest way to pay is then through your online account. Obviously, the drawback with that is that there's something to do. So you might be receiving a bill every month, and then you've got to take action every month to pay for your energy. But the positive is you pay for exactly the amount that you've used. A direct debit means that money is automatically taken from your bank account. So often it's either every month or it's quarterly. So that's every 3 months, 4 times in a year. So your energy supplier will estimate how much you're going to use in the year. They'll divide that, if it's monthly, by 12, and then they'll bill you that amount each month. So what that means is that if you're on a direct debit, you might pay, say you live in a 1-bed flat, you might pay £110 every month for the whole year, and that covers all of your gas and electricity. But in the summer, you're actually using quite a bit less. So there's sort of there's positives and negatives to both methods, sort of whichever works for you. The next one on this list is standing order. So really similar to direct debit, you pay the same amount each time. It happens automatically at regular intervals, but it's set up by you rather than your supplier. It's a less common one, but it does mean you can change the payment amount or cancel it whenever you like. Fuel Direct is arranged between DWP and your energy supplier. So it covers fuel debt and your current usage from a qualifying benefit. And then pay as you go, already talked about. So basically you pay for your energy before you use it. People often call it topping up. So you have to regularly top up on your phone or using a key or a card at the shop. If you currently pay by pay as you go and you don't have a smart meter, you're going to have to be going to a Payzone, PayPoint, post office to top up. If you're responsible for paying your bills directly, you are entitled to talk to your landlord or housing provider about getting a smart meter installed. The positive here is that you then should be able to pay on your phone, which just means it's obviously a lot easier to do, especially on a cold night in winter, and if you have any other health conditions that make it tricky to get out. So a tariff is a deal or a contract that you have with your energy supplier, which decides what you pay. There are different types of tariff. The main ones are fixed rate. This means your standing charge and unit rate won't change while your contract lasts, but there may be an exit fee to pay if you leave the contract early. Standard variable, which means the rate you pay for gas and electricity will change as energy prices do. Just the same for pay as you go. Your rate is set by the energy price cap. And then time of use, like Economy 7, this means you're charged 2 different rates for your electricity. It's usually cheaper overnight and then more expensive during the day. This will only really be cheaper overall if you have an electric storage heater or electric immersion heater or another type of electric heating which charges up overnight. Unless you have that time of use tariff, your electricity will cost the same during the day and at night time. Historically, fixed rate was often the cheapest option. So we're going back 5 years ago, people would switch suppliers, find the cheapest fixed rate contracts that might last for a year or 2 years. These days, fixed rate contracts are often set above the energy price cap, whereas the standard variable or the pay-as-you-go option will be kept under the price cap. So that's why those are cheaper right now. So as we said earlier, for most customers, your standard variable or your pay-as-you-go is the cheapest option. Now we're going to look at reading bills. So the main point here is that all energy bills look different. We have 2 examples here, both from the same energy supplier. You can see just on here your account summary, so your total costs and payments that you've made since your last bill. There are 2 words used on here, debit and credit. So debit means money you owe your supplier. Credit means, in this instance, you've paid more than your usage. you could almost think of it as money that your supplier owes you, but in reality, most people build credit. Perhaps over the summer, you might build your credit so that over winter, you're paying a little bit less than your actual usage, but it's balanced out by that credit that you built up over the summer. It's as we were talking about with direct debit, it's a way to kind of balance out your payments throughout the year. But you'll notice a key difference between these two bills. So the one on the left is an example bill from British Gas's website, and it's really helpfully got these plus and minus signs as well. And then the one on the right doesn't have any plus and minuses, so it's a little bit more confusing. The one on the right is a real bill. So we'll look at this in a bit more detail. Here, when the word credit isn't used, that means it's debit. So this person, at the time of their last bill, owed their supplier £100. They were at £100 in debit. Over the last period of this bill, let's say it's a month, they've used a further £150, which means in total, they now owe their supplier £250 or £250 debit. The way we know that is because it's not credit. You could kind of imagine a minus number before the 100 and the 150. So we're on minus 250 at the moment. They paid their supplier £200 credit. You could imagine a little plus sign before that 200. So minus 250 plus 200 equals minus 50. So that 50 at the end doesn't have a minus, it doesn't have a debit, but from doing that math slash looking at, where's the credit here? What's the credit and what's the debit? We can work out that actually that 50 is minus 50 or 50 debit. So at the time of this bill, they owe their supplier £50. Here's another way that it could be put. So we don't have either the word credit or debit here, but I think this one's actually a bit more easy to understand because we've got that minus and that plus sign, but it's just the same. They owed their supplier £100 at the time of their last bill. They've used another £150 of energy, so that's minus 250. They've paid 200 plus 200, and they're left with minus 50 overall. There's a link there at the bottom of the page to a web page on our website, which gives you a bit more information about reading bills. The other thing I'd really recommend doing is Googling your energy supplier's name and then the words understanding energy bills. So it might be British Gas understanding energy bills, and something will come up, a really useful page that explains your supplier's bills and how they work. Next, we're going to talk about reading meters. So you don't need to read your meter if you've got a smart meter. But if you've got a traditional meter, it's really helpful to read your meters quite regularly. So most people do it once a month. It can be helpful to do it on the same day each month. So you might do it on the 1st of every month or on the last day. So it might be the 28th or the 31st. Or the 30th. Hopefully you've got a nice simple meter like this. There are sort of 3 things to remember here. So you're just looking at the numbers left to right like you usually would. You don't include the numbers in red, but you do include the zeros at the start. So this meter reads 00014. You can ignore those red numbers. It's also helpful to know the difference between a gas and an electricity meter. So we can tell this one's a gas meter because of the units. So gas is measured in cubic meters. So all that means is that little M3 that you can see, or it might be in cubic feet. So then you'd see FT3. Electricity is measured in kilowatt hours. So on your electricity meter, you'll see a kWh, kilowatt hour. The other really helpful method to tell the difference is that you should, by your gas meter, see a big yellow sign that says, warning, if you smell gas, ... That can sometimes be an easier way to spot. So if it's on your electricity meter, you're not going to see that big yellow sign. Talking with energy suppliers some people can find it difficult. You might have to wait on the phone if you call them. But there are lots of ways that you can make it a bit easier for yourself. So we've got some tips here for what happens, sort of guiding you through a phone call with your gas or electricity supplier. But it's worth saying first that many suppliers these days offer online chat options. So it might be first you have to talk to a little AI, but then you're able to get through to an actual advisor, or you might be able to email them instead. But some you do still need to call. So we've got 5 tips for calling your supplier. First, get your account number ready before you get on the phone. So you could jot it down either on paper or on a note on your phone, and also write down any questions that you have so you've got them all to hand. Make sure you've got the best number to call before calling and waiting. So a key one here is if you're pay-as-you-go, there might be a special number for pay-as-you-go customers. So just search that online before you call up. You may have a better chance of getting through if you call first thing in the morning, so that might be at 9 o'clock. But obviously if you try then and it doesn't work and you're on the phone for 30 minutes, you could try again at another time. It will be dependent on your supplier. A really key one is make sure you take notes. So ideally the date and the time that you've had the phone call and the name of anyone you're speaking to. You can just say, would you mind if I checked your name? And write down what they say, the advice that they're giving or what they say about your account, and make sure to ask what's going to happen next at the end of your phone call. So you've got that written down as well. If you have a problem with your energy supply or you're unhappy with the service that you've received, you have the right to complain. Energy suppliers are legally obliged to follow Ofgem's licensing conditions. And if you have a long-term mental health condition, you're actually classed as a vulnerable customer within the energy market. We'll talk a bit more about that at the end and what extra support you're entitled to as a result. But it basically means your energy supplier has to take into account any sort of additional needs that you might have when it comes to, for example, communicating with them or the service that you're receiving. So I've got some tips here for making complaints. Firstly, you can find out how your energy supplier will process your complaint on their website. So we've got an example here. This is from OVO's website of their complaints page. So again, just search the name of your supplier and complaints or making a complaint, and then it will take you through step by step what you need to do and what will happen, what your supplier will do afterwards once you've made the complaint. Again, make sure you're taking notes while you're on the phone, including the name of the person you've spoken to. And if you have made a complaint and you haven't heard back from your supplier, I'd really urge you to contact them to follow up. Don't just assume that they'll get back in touch with you. If you've made a complaint, it's 3 weeks later, you haven't heard anything, you're entitled to get back in touch and make sure that they are taking action. Similarly, don't let your supplier close the complaint until you're happy the problem is sorted. So you might be on the phone and they might say, so you happy this has all been resolved? If you're not, you can say no. And if your supplier hasn't met its obligations, you may be able to get compensation. The thing to ask for here is not compensation. It's a goodwill gesture, that phrase in particular. But we can give you more information about all of this. So at the end of this, we'll have our phone number and our email address, so you're more than welcome to get in touch with us. It's something we often support people with. And our team are really, really experienced with helping support people who are trying to resolve issues with their supplier. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about staying warm or cool at home and just saving energy on bills more generally. So living in cold conditions can lead to sort of health impacts. So really the target temperature at home is 18 to 21 degrees. That's 18 degrees if your thermostat's in the hallway, 21 degrees if it's in a living room. That goes up to 24 degrees if you've got someone at home who's a bit less mobile. So a newborn or someone with a health condition, someone in a wheelchair or someone over the age of 75. But for people who are a bit more mobile, 18 to 21 should be just fine. And we don't need to set the thermostat any higher. Most of the time, obviously, everyone feels the cold differently. Thinking about the sort of health impacts, really we're trying to avoid being below 15 degrees for long periods. But I'll skip over that because that's, no need to go into detail. When I talk about energy consumption, I always talk about it as a pyramid. So the thing that uses the most energy at home is anything that produces heat. First and foremost, your heating. Then hot water. And then we'll talk about all the rest after we've looked at those two. The best way to reduce the cost of your heating is to reduce your heat loss. So we actually lose most of the heat from our homes through the walls. This is for an average semi-detached property. We then lose it through the roof. Again, obviously, if you're in a flat and you've got a property above you, you'll be losing a bit less because hopefully that property is a bit warmer than the outside. And then it's through things like our drafts around windows and doors for our floor. And then finally, we actually only lose 10%, which isn't on here, but just 10% through our windows itself. So the most impactful thing we can do, if you own your home or you're privately renting and you've got a good relationship with your landlord, is think about insulating, particularly our walls and our loft. There is grant funding in Hampshire to support with this. Again, that's something that we often help people, we can help people access grant funding to support with insulation. If you own your own home or if you're privately renting, and there's a few other eligibility criteria, but we'll go over that at the end. If you're in social housing, so you're with a housing provider or you're in a council property, we can provide, currently we can provide some smaller items that will help you keep warm, so things that will stop drafts instead. So again, you're welcome to get in touch with us. If you're moving home, I'd always recommend looking at the Energy Performance Certificate. D is average. So if you're D, don't worry. Legally, all rented properties have to be E or above. And it might have some useful suggestions on there. You can find yours online on the government website. If you've moved within the last 10 years, it will still be listed on there, so you can have a look. Next thing that should help with reducing the cost of your heating and your hot water is getting to understand your energy controls. So you might have a room thermostat or a programmer. Often we move into rented properties and we don't get instructions and we go, oh my gosh, what does this machine mean? It's completely different from all the others that I've seen. What I'd recommend is Googling any words that you can see on the programmer. So you might be able to see a brand and a make and a model. Google that and the word instructions, and you should find a good PDF that gives you all the details of how to use it. The reason why this can help us save money is because it kind of removes human error. It means that we'll have like a steady heating program, which should always kind of keep us warm. But if you've just got a room thermostat, obviously you are going to have to be turning that on and off yourself manually. But if you've got a program, and most people find it useful to set a heating program that it might turn on 30 minutes before they get up in the morning, and then switch off 30 minutes before they leave the house if you're out during the day. And then it might come on again 30 minutes before the time you usually get home, and then switch off in the evening once you're sort of safely snuggled under a warm blanket on the sofa, and you don't need the heating on anymore. You might also have thermostatic radiator valves if you've got a gas boiler and radiators. 2 to 3 is sort of the recommended setting to have it on, but it depends on the energy efficiency of the room. So you might be, your bedroom might have a closed off fireplace in, but you can tell that it's still a really cold room. You've got drafts coming down that, and you might want that one up at 4 or 5. But basically it just allows you to control each room, put it at a different temperature. We've already talked about smart meters, so obviously some benefits are if you are pay-as-you-go, you can top up on your phone rather than at a shop. It can also, if you know, no matter how you pay for your energy, it means you don't have to send those meter readings in. The other benefit is the in-home display. So some people can find these a bit worrying. I've heard people say, you know, I don't want to see how much I'm spending to have the heating on. If that's the case, I've heard many people tell me that they've either unplugged their in-home display or hidden it away in a kitchen cupboard. You don't need the in-home display, that part that you can see in your kitchen or your living room. You don't actually need it plugged in for your smart meter, which is the meter box itself, to still be working perfectly. So you might think it's worth having a smart meter so I don't have to worry about sending meter readings, but I don't want to look at the in-home display. And you could just unplug that or turn it so that it's facing the opposite direction. The reason why the in-home display, or 2 reasons why the in-home display can be useful, can help you just keep track as you go day by day, how much am I spending? And it can also help you look at specific things. So if you have a dishwasher, it might have loads of different settings on it, you know, eco, super time, save. There's loads of different names of each setting. You could try one day, if nothing else is really on at home, you could try putting it on one setting, and then the next time you're going to use it, you could try it on a different setting and see how much is that cost from on one day and then on the next time you try it. So it allows you to kind of compare within specific appliances. I also did just want to mention electric storage heaters. So if you have storage heaters, the older type, you might recognize this image on the left, and you might have just these 2 controls on the right, and then maybe a boost as well. So your input controls how much heat the storage heater stores up overnight, and the output controls the speed with which it's released. So if you really feel like upping your storage heater control game, there is something you can do which makes the whole system run much more efficiently. So first off, say it's 10 p.m, you're getting ready for bed. Check the weather for the next day. You see that it's going to be a cold day. So you want to turn that input up to 5 or 6, or it might be the sort of biggest dot. Basically, you're turning the input up to full. What that means is that you're storing as much heat as you possibly can, because you know it's going to be a cold day, you're going to need it. And then you turn the output down to really low. And the reason is that means the heat will be released slowly throughout the whole day. And then when it gets to 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. the next day and it's cold and you've just got home and you want it to be a bit warmer, you can turn the output up to 5 or 6 or full and basically release all the remaining heat to give the temperature at home a bit of a boost. The crux is remembering before you go to bed to turn the output back down to 2 or 3. So often people say to me, I've got storage heaters, my input's up at high, but all the heat just goes, first thing in the morning, it's warm, but by midday it's freezing and there's no heat left. It might be because their output's just at a really high position. So it's at 5 or 6 or that biggest dot. And actually doing that process of turning it down to 2 or 3 before you go to bed, and then turning it up to 5 or 6 or full when it gets to the evening can help keep the heat being released at a slower pace throughout the day, so that you've got some heat left in the heater for your evening when it is cooler. I mentioned that we have some sort of small draft proofing and other things that you can do at home that we can currently provide for people who are struggling to stay warm. These are some examples, so we don't have all of these, but these are just some good things that you can do at home. So draft proofing, especially if you've got single glazed windows or you're noticing a big draft coming in through your window. Reflective radiator foil, it's really good on uninsulated walls. Really popular in the 80s and the 90s, but it's kind of gone out of fashion since. It still works, and especially on any of those behind radiators on a wall that goes from inside your home to outside. So it might be a radiator with a window above it. If that wall is uninsulated, the heat from the radiator will leave your property through the wall. So you stick the reflective radiator foil to the wall and it bounces the heat back into the room. So it's maximizing the temperature, the kind of heat output of that radiator. Only works on a gas boiler and hot water wet central heating system. But basically that means behind a normal radiator, doesn't work behind a storage heater. We've also got, you could also do put thermal curtain lining up or insulate your hot water tank. That's a really fantastic one to do if you've got an old hot water tank. You can insulate it just by putting an old duvet around it and taping it together. Just make sure that you've still got the heating control visible. And then you can also lag your pipes, obviously. You can buy all of this from DIY stores or from online, and it's relatively cheap. So it could be something to think about if you've got a particularly cold room. So it might be a really cold living room or one of your children's bedrooms. So that covers our heating and our hot water. So what we've got left at the top of the pyramid, first up, anything that produces heat, so any appliance that produces heat is going to be the next most expensive. And then we basically go down in size. So then it will be things like fridges and freezers that will cost the most. Then it will be things like TVs. And finally, it's those things like lights and chargers. They cost the least to use. So I'm not saying to stop switching off plugs or switching off lights. Those are still fantastic things to do. But what that means is anything that we can do to save energy with those appliances that produce heat, that will save us the most money. So some examples of things you can do there are putting on washing at 30 degrees, waiting until you've got a full load. That applies to everything. So your washing machine, your tumble dryer, your dishwasher, your oven, using your oven to batch cook. That's one I do. I'll batch cook sort of 8 portions at once and then heat them up in the microwave. Your microwave is much cheaper to run. Especially an electric oven costs a lot, and similarly with a shower. So a gas shower, obviously you're using gas and water, but your electric shower, it's got an element inside of it a bit like a kettle, so it's going to be one of the most expensive appliances you've got at home. So if you can just shave a minute off your shower, you'll be saving both on your water bill and really on your electricity bill as well. The sort of recommended shower length is 4 minutes, which I can't do when I'm washing my hair, but I know that some people can, and you could do it even just by saying I'll be in the shower for the length of 2 songs, and make sure to choose songs that aren't too long. Obviously, avoiding tumble dryers if possible, depending on your property, and not doing the ironing. There is stuff you can do with fridges and freezers, but it makes less of a difference. I'll skip over that for now. And then obviously there's the bits we've already talked about, so turning off lights and appliances, not overfilling the kettle. And when you are buying new things, having a look at the energy efficiency label, because that will give you a sense. It'll help you compare between 2 projects, you know, what is going to cost the most to run. Some ideas for keeping cool as well. First off, it's really helpful to check the weather forecast in advance to help you plan your day. It's a really good idea not to go out during the hottest part of the day if you can. So that's 11 to 3 p.m. And you can also check the NHS website for the latest advice just by searching heat wave. Keeping yourself cool, so drinking lots of cold drinks, slowing your movements down, walking at a slower pace, choosing really light, loose-fitted clothing, keeping your skin cool, so splash of water on your face or the back of your neck can make you feel cooler straight away, and even consider sleeping in a cooler room if you can. If you do go out, try to keep in the shade, and ensure that family members and pets aren't left in cars, and take a break from the heat if you're out and about. So sometimes buildings like libraries and places of worship are kept cool. They're a lot cooler than just being outside. Keeping your home cool, so there's lots you can do there. The key trick is actually when it's hottest, we want our windows closed and the curtains or the blinds closed as well, because it's going to be hotter outside than it is at home. So what I do is first thing in the morning, I open all the windows, try and get a draft through the property. And then as soon as it gets to about 9, 10, I shut all the windows, shut the blinds, and then I keep them closed until about 5 when it's cooler outside than it is inside, and then I open up the windows again. And the medical assistance one, I just wanted to mention, obviously making sure that any prescription medicines are kept in a cool place. And obviously if you're feeling very unwell and need help, you can call the NHS on 111 or in an emergency 999 as well. Reducing damp and mold. So we've got a I've got the name of this, a chart here that basically is a way of thinking about what might be the cause of the damp and the mold that you're experiencing. So there's 4 different types that this is leading to. Rising damp, it's the least common. You'll see like a really clear tide mark on your wall, and it's basically coming up if there's a damaged damp proof course. The next one, it's sort of people call it penetrating damp. It's due to an external fault on the building. So there might be a tile out of place. Basically, a key way to tell whether it's that is if it gets worse when it's rained, it might dry out when it's sunny. It might be a plumbing fault, so you might be able to tell by the fact it's near taps or in the bathroom or the kitchen. But the most common type that we get here in the UK is caused by condensation. So basically everything we do at home, including just breathing, produces condensation, and that moisture in the air settles on the coldest surface it finds, and over a period of time, dampness forms and then mold. So got some key tips, obviously cleaning, either using bleach or mold killer, heating, so keeping the property up above 15 degrees. You might choose to sort of keep the heating on even at 12 degrees while you're out, or 15 degrees while you're out. It means it'll take less gas or electricity to heat up when you're back, and it also should really reduce the amount of damp and mold that's forming. Ventilation, so keeping windows open, using trickle vents, those are those little vents above the windows, making sure air bricks are unblocked, or if you don't have trickle vents, keeping your window latched open to ensure some ventilation throughout the day. And then changing our behaviour when we're doing those sort of high moisture producing activities. So making sure we're using extractor fans when we're cooking and when we're in the shower, and the recommendations actually to leave the extractor fan on for 15 minutes afterwards. What I do is when I'm cooking, I'll shut the kitchen door so that I know the moisture's staying just in that room. I'll switch the extractor fan on and I'll have it on while I'm cooking, and then for 15 minutes afterwards until all the moisture's gone, and then I'll open up that door again, because otherwise what happens is we produce moisture in the kitchen or in the bathroom. It travels through our property to the coldest wall, the coldest surface it can find, and that's where it condenses. So we might be doing something in the bathroom that is leading to mold on the other side of the house, on a cold wall. So yeah, it's important to kind of keep that moisture in one place until we know it's all gone. Legally, there is a joint responsibility between tenant and housing provider, landlord, to reduce damp and mold at home. So if you're doing everything you can and you're still getting damp and mold, and you know that, for example, you don't have an extractor fan and that might be what's leading to it, you can get in touch with your landlord or your housing provider, and explain to them all the actions that you're already doing, and it might be helpful to mention any health conditions that you have that are impacted at home. Finally, there is extra support, as I mentioned earlier, for people who are classed as vulnerable within the energy market. So that's anyone with a long-term health condition, including mental health conditions. We always recommend signing up with SSEN. They're the electricity network operator for the whole of Hampshire. So they're one step above an energy supplier. They provide, they're the ones who sort of go out and fix the lines when there's a problem. You can apply online. It takes about 30 seconds. It's incredibly easy. Basically means you get priority. If there's ever a power cut or an outage, you'll be put back on first. And the reason why we recommend signing up with SSEN is that they'll let your electricity, gas and water supplier know in one go. Alternately, you could sign up with each of your suppliers. Every energy or utility supplier in the UK is legally obliged to have one of these, a register of priority customers, basically. It also means your suppliers know that you just might have some additional needs or requirements when it comes to sort of communication. So one key example is people with anxiety often say that they prefer speaking by email or by chat, WhatsApp message rather than by phone. And again, as we were talking about earlier, it might be that your supplier has those options. And being on the priority services just means you can say, look, I'm a vulnerable customer, and I would prefer to communicate in this way. I've got a list of some financial support there, but again, what I'd recommend is if you are struggling with the cost of your bills and you want some extra advice on this, you can get in touch with us. And our contact details will be at the end. So I mentioned some eligibility criteria for the grant funding that we can help people access, or those sort of small draft proofing things. Basically, the different grants in Hampshire to give sort of free insulation or replacement boilers and so on, usually prioritise people who are on low income. So that might be someone who's on a means tested benefit or have a household income of less than £30,000 in a year. Also prioritised are people with health conditions, so that might be a physical health condition or a mental health condition, and then people of certain age as well, so people over the age of 65 or families with children under the age of 5. But if that isn't you, we invite you still to call us anyway, because we might be able to find other ways to support you. And we've got a team of phone advisors who can just offer general energy saving advice and support no matter what your circumstance. I mentioned the sort of energy saving things earlier. These are just some of the things that we can provide. People who are struggling to pay their bills or living in cold properties. So the reflective radiator foil, energy efficient light bulbs, draft proofing and so on. It's worth mentioning again that because we're funded by Hampshire County Council, our support is limited to people living within Hampshire, but there are equivalent services in every sort of local authority or equivalent support. So you might want to head to your local authority's website and just search the word energy if you're actually in Surrey. Here's our details, so our phone number, our email address, and finally our website. And if you'd like just more general tips on how to save energy at home, head to our Facebook page, give us a like. We're always posting stuff on there, different tips and ideas. That's everything from me, and thank you so much for catching up on this session.